Mo is here, Amanda's here, and Emoli is here. And all the staff we need. Is Lex here? Because Lex is presenting.
Lex is not here,
Who's
but
gonna?
Amy and I will be standing in.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. All right, let's approve the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve from January 2023 and February 2023. Does any commissioner have a change to the minutes? None? All right, hearing none, let's go ahead and put motion together to approve that, please. Go ahead and approve both of them, sure. I move to approve both. Perfect. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Anybody opposed? All right, the meeting minutes are approved for January, February 2023. Report of the chair and vice chair. I got no report. You got any report? We never have any reports. I feel bad.
You should report something.
I know. What should I report? That dinner was
Oh.
pretty good. Thanks.
Thanks for the frittles.
All right. Report of the director. Oh, dun, dun, dun.
Just to let you know, the Historic Landmark Commission 2022 annual report is in your Dropbox.
Oh, boy.
Yes, we had 431 HLC-related applications last year.
We did?
We did. And quite frankly, that's about a 10-year average, around 430 to almost every year, right? And that's about 40% of our workload is actually preservation work. So we're trending about the same as we had last year, or the last decade. We're about 10% of applications are reviewed by you all, right? The code requires review for some applications, and some we forward to your review based on on how complex they are, or if we just can't negotiate with the applicant. About 90% are approved administratively because they meet the standards. So I'd say over the past 10 years, about 10% go to you all. Last year, 9% of applications were reviewed by the Landmark Commission. And then there's just some other information in there about agenda items that you reviewed and stats on website analytics. So take a look.
Great. Thank you. I can't wait to read it.
All right. Thank you. I think that's about all I have, actually.
Thank you. All right. Time for public comments. Commission will hear public comments not pertaining to items listed on the agenda. We have one card from Cindy Croma. Oh, we've taken away the shell of. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Can I come up here? Or do you want me to go over there?
Can you take your mask off?
no, I'm gonna take the
Yes,
mask off.
thank you.
You can talk there, Cindy. Just
What's
get
that?
up. You please talk there. That's fine. Just get right in there and eat that
Okay.
microphone.
All right, I will.
Thanks.
So I sent you all something by Luke Garrett that appeared in Building Salt Lake regarding a building in the Central City Historic District. I was shocked when Luke sent me an email. I thought it was another change in status from contributory to non-contributory that had occurred without public process. That's one of my problems right now. And then I realized that, in my opinion, it was another error by the consultant 12 years ago, one that I felt very guilty for not catching at the time. And now I'm finding, it's the third level of my understanding, that there are people who agree with the non-contributory designation. I have no professional training, just excessive amounts of experience on the subject. So I asked two professionals who have a lot of training, and they both viewed the building as contributory. So I want to share with you how I look at these things, because it's apparently different than how other people look at these things. I look at the contributory, non-contributory status like an appraiser would, because for me, that's the value of the building, is whether it's contributory or non-contributory. Yeah. And so when I look at that building, I see an intact soffit with all the architectural detail, the dentils, the brackets, the original beadboard. And I'm like, wow, that is so rare to have that intact, the roof line and the soffit. And then I look at the placement of the windows, and I go, yeah, that's pretty much how they would have been in a building then. Got replacement glass, but the windows are where they're supposed to be. Yeah. Now, the stucco over the brick is a problem because that's not likely to be a reversible change, but the enclosure of the porch is very common in this district and in others. And so I went over with my tape measure from the street, staying on public property, and estimated the dimensions of the porch. And then I walked to the block to the north and measured some porches that hadn't been altered. And this porch is very similar in its dimensions to the porches that have never been altered. And I suspect that the structure of the porch is under that enclosure. That's my own experience in restoring a porch. So I'm doing this pluses and minuses thing like the appraisers are trained to do, and I come down to bing, bing, bing. It's like you're in the grocery store and you brought your own bag, and they hit the bag credit over and over and over again. This building is in the most photographed part of the historic district, north of 400 South. The streetscape on both sides of 300 South is absolutely fabulous here, and that's what people photograph when they're talking about the Central City Historic District. There's another section that always gets photographed below 800 South, but this is the one in the north section. And so bing, 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 I'm like the clerk in the grocery store hitting over and over again, streetscape, streetscape, streetscape for the bag credit. That's what this building has. It's the anchor of the streetscape at the corner. And it makes it onto my list of contributory without any trouble. Thanks.
Thank you. Staff, can you update us on that particular project?
Absolutely. There was a public process, so I think there's some misconceptions out in the community that there wasn't a public process. There was, to adopt the 2012 Central City Historic District and the RLS survey. Now, absolutely, do surveys have errors? Absolutely, and we review them. Sometimes in the past, we've brought them to the Landmark Commission to review them. We have hired consultants to do an ILS on properties that we maybe felt or didn't have enough qualified professionals on staff. Now, when the 2012 survey does list this building as non-contributing, we are reviewing, and we've been very transparent with others in the public, we are reviewing everything in Central City. If there's ever a question, I mean, we are reviewing very closely, a group of us, any status. So the survey does say non-contributory. We took a quick look at it and questioned it. After we did an extensive amount of review on the property, we agree that it's non-contributory with the alterations, and it has been completely stuccoed over the brick. The stucco is non-reversible. Could some things be reversed? Perhaps. But our stance, and we have also run it past SHPO, is that it's a non-contributory building. And so to be transparent with the public, we thought it best to actually write up an administrative interpretation for the public, but also for our own records within the city.
Thank you. All right. Okay, let's move on to,
Sorry, I just wanted to add that if anyone's interested in the administrative interpretation, I did add it to the Dropbox just so that you could reference it in terms of the comments that Cindy sent in.
great, thank you.
I'm sorry, I had one other thing to add as well. It'll be quick.
Okay,
Chair Delay. City Council has given us $75,000, and we will be putting out an RFP annually, to have qualified surveyors submit bids to update all of our surveys, and we are going to start with Central City because we have, and as Cindy knows and others in the past, there are some errors. We don't feel that this is one of those. Yes, it is absolutely a loss on that corner, and that streetscape is intact. However, we are following our code and being true to
okay,
interpretations. Thank you.
thank you. Cindy, do you want to try and get one of those jobs as a surveyor? Okay. All right, thank you all. All right, let's move on to our public hearings tonight, this Thursday, March 2nd. The first one is regarding the major alteration for the Fisher Mansion Carriage House, HVAC, at approximately 1206 West 200 South, case number PLNHL C 2023-00118. And
Chair, if I may
Yes.
interject, I'm
Yes.
recusing myself from this hearing
Yes,
due
you
to a
are.
conflict of interest.
good, go sit in the audience.
Chair, I am doing the same thing, actually.
Good deal. All right, so we have John Iwanowski, the vice chair, recusing himself, and we have Carlton Getz recusing himself as well. Thank you both.
Do we have quorum?
We have a quorum now of 5.
Great.
There are 8 commissioners, 2 recused, and 1 is not here, so,
My math says 5.
all right. So staff
Thank you.
is going to be Kelsey. Go for it.
Hey, Aubrey, the computer won't turn on.
Sleepy. Sleepy
I don't know.
computer. Wakey, wakey. What is all that? How to work your ClickServe. Okay. Click share.
Oh, that's where the power button is.
Ready, aim, go.
Gonna be a minute. We're trying.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll give the public a brief idea of what's going on here. CRSA, on behalf of Parks and Public Lands, is seeking approval for a major alteration to the Fisher Mansion Carriage House associated with the Fisher Mansion. The applicant is seeking approval for the installation of HVAC units, conduit, and associated cages on the northern elevation, which have already been installed. The subject property is located at the above stated address, 1206 West 200 South, which is designated as Salt Lake City Landmark Site. Both structures, the mansion and carriage house, are listed as contributing structures to the landmark site. And the subject property is located within the institutional zoning district and within Council District 2, represented by Alejandro Puy. And now.
Thank you, Commissioner DeLay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a request by Parks and Public Lands for a major alteration to the Fisher Mansion Carriage House. The carriage house is located at 1206 West 200 South. The request includes a retroactive approval for the installation of 8 HVAC units, conduit lines, and the associated cages. Staff is recommending denial of the requested major alteration. As a brief reminder, the Historic Landmark Commission approved the adaptive reuse of the carriage house in September of 2020. The plan set provided to planning indicated 2 condenser pads to the north. The alterations to the north elevation primarily included minor masonry repairs and storm windows. No additional alterations were proposed and no additional information was provided. This was the northern elevation as shown and was provided to staff, and what you subsequently approved in 2020. So what was installed? There are 8 HVAC units, as you can see in the photograph. The conduit line also runs up the elevation. Additionally, to secure the units and the conduit, engineering installed the steel cages and conduit covers, as you can see in the photograph. The applicants are proposing 2 methods of mitigation, one being painting the conduit covers to a similar color of the masonry. You can see that on the left side of the screen. And then the comparison on the right is what it currently looks like. The second approach is to plant vegetation along the western fence to shield the public view along the Jordan River Trail. The illustration on the screen demonstrates the mature vegetation. As discussed in the staff report, staff often works with property owners and applicants on appropriate locations and installation of mechanical equipment. Had the applicants contacted staff, staff would have worked on a reduction of the units, appropriate siting, and a reduction of the conduit lines. So in summary, staff is recommending that the Historic Landmark Commission deny the requested major alteration. And I will turn the time over to the applicants.
Applicant, come up and introduce yourselves, please, and talk directly into the microphone.
Have both of us join?
I'm Kenneth Whedon with CRSA.
Is your microphone on?
Yeah, I think it is.
And talk right into it.
I'm Kenneth Whedon with CRSA, located at 175 South Main Street, Suite 300.
I'm Zach Clegg, also with CRSA.
Good evening, board. Tyler Murdoch, Salt Lake City Parks and Public Lands. I was here in November giving an update on this project, so good to be back.
Mark Stevens, City Engineer in Public Services Department.
Okay, great. Thank you. Speak.
Okay, so when we evaluated this building, just getting to the fundamentals of the type of system that we installed, is that we looked at forced air system, which required some air handler units and large ductwork and very invasive to the interior of the building. As such, we decided that the best course of action was to do a mini split system, which reduces the amount of the impact on the interior. However, the exterior, you do have to have condensing units. We fully acknowledge the fact that the representative documentation when we first gave it to the HLC did not fully represent the initial design, which actually had 5 condensing units on the back side.
These are 8 now, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
During the construction phase of the project, when the rep for the system that came on board, and we evaluated the rooms and the allocations of them, the decision between the rep and the engineer of record was that 8 units would better suffice to meet the capacity for the change of use of this building, going basically from a stable and a hayloft to office and mixed use. So we fully acknowledge the fact that, yes, it is a full impact on the backside of the building. However, you can go to the next one. When we look at historic structures, typically there's a primary sod, which is usually the front of the building. Outside of that, you have secondary facades, which are either the sides or the side and the back. And then usually there's a tertiary side. And that tertiary side is usually what we use for our evaluation as to mitigate whatever we need to do to support the building and the function of the building. And in the consideration of this, we had considered that the back be the tertiary side. It is unfortunate that during the sequence of events, the information was not revealed to the HLC that the impact of the mechanical units greatly increased. And they compound that was during the whole process of this, during construction, is the front fence was stolen. And Salt Lake Engineering requested that we do something in order to mitigate any theft of the units and the conduits because they would be exposed to view. The problem is that in order to do that, the best way to do it was to consolidate them in such a way that they would be the less impactful, not being away from the building, which would be a bit of a distraction, but consolidate them towards the backside of the building. As pointed out to us, that created a problem with the view as viewed from the Jordan River Trail. And in that respect, it was compounded that now we have 3 secondary sides, basically. So at the behest of HLC, we took it upon ourselves to look at how would it be viewed in the sequence of approaching the building. Typically, you approach it from the front. The first one is that, as you know, there's events that happen on there. And when they set up their stage, they typically do it off the north east corner, they set up their stage and use the back of that for their staging area, hence about where the cages are located.
That's where the stage is, where the cages are?
Yeah, so just off the corner, going back, that's typically where they set up the stage for when they hold events.
Okay.
And then they stage everything behind that, which is about where the cages are. So we took that into consideration when we were looking at ways to mitigate, spreading these in different directions. So one of the things that we did, as you can see as you approach the building, that you don't really see the cages until you really come upon it. This is, as you're going around, as if you were looking right at it almost, and then obviously the view if you're right behind it. So the other part of it was, since the concern was the visual impact on the trail, we started from 200 South and walked up the trail looking if the carriage house was our primary focus going through the trail. We were going to look at nothing else. And so we took a series of pictures as when does the impact occur for those cages. And as you can see, you're almost right upon it to the backside, and you need to look directly through the fence to see the impact. And we continued that way as we went all the way up, just like I said, taking a series of pictures to see if that is a primary focus when you walk on the trail. And it seems to get lost the further you go up the bridge because of the nature of the construction of the slats in the bridge fencing. So with that, as shown with the exhibits, we looked at, okay, if we change the color of the conduit covers, even if you go from here, like Kelsey had shown before, where you on the right you have the colored and the left you have as the current color is, and then if you go back up to the trail, again going up the trail, are you reducing the impact of visually? You can still see the cages and everything through the fence, and then going up the bridge. And you can see the one on the right is with the light colored, and the one on the left is with the dark colored. So we also did this in preparation, as Kelsey pointed out, was that if that did not suffice, because it does go above the fence, the conduit covers, that the impact, if you actually want to look through the fence, would the plantings suffice for that screening effect? And so we had proposed either a Titan boxwood, which would be a more formal type of bush, or a blood twig dogwood, which would be a more of a naturalized look, and it would change, but it would still help screen that. I mean, between the fence and the plantings to look at the cages from the trail, we felt that either one of those would suffice enough to screen it.
Are they water-wise?
Yes, both of those are was it?
Water-wise.
Section 7 of the planting, which we are in.
Okay, good. Groovy, is that your presentation?
That's the gist of the presentation.
Okay, perfect. Do we have any questions?
When I've been out there and I've walked and biked along there, it seems like in the past there were picnic tables at the north end of this building, several of them. Is that changed? Are there going to be tables out there and places to picnic?
I'll let Tyler, who's going to be the user of the building.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Michael. So we do store the picnic tables there for events. That's not where they're kept for normal use. So the grounds, as you may be aware, were also renovated and restored. So as Ken mentioned, we typically have the stage that's placed behind the building. Picnic tables are then brought out into the east lawn.
The stage is here where these condensers are?
Well, the stage usually is a trailer that they bring out, and it's a temporary trailer, temporary stage.
Yeah, from Oasis. They drive it out. Yeah.
It's angled off that
Okay.
corner building headed to the northwest or northeast.
What's the dealio with all the bad windows?
Oh, so part of that thing
That
is
is more
that.
bugly than
okay.
these things, the windows.
Those are not the finished product.
Thank
What we're-
goodness.
Okay. So in the sequence of this is part of that thing to mitigate, again, any vandalism or theft. Not only is there anti-graffiti coating on the brick, is that we are planning on installing storm windows that not only give thermal quality to it, but there are going to be a laminated glass, safety glass, so that if somebody chucks a rock, it'll break that and not the historic window. Most of those windows are intact. We did have to replace a few panes, and we did restore the sashes on all of the windows. So I think there were only 2 windows we actually had to replace.
Yeah, there's one other thing I'll just point out too. In this view right here, the actual hayloft door is rolled out of sight. So when we took this picture, we didn't exactly realize that, but there's a storefront in front of that, a fixed window, so that they can move it aside to allow light into the space while maintaining the historic function of the hayloft door.
Yeah, it also.
Below that,
Sorry?
below the,
That
Right
one.
there?
the
Another
hay
window.
door.
Those are just currently covered up for protection until the storm windows are installed.
Right. Yeah, so there's also plexiglass in front of all the windows also until those show up, because we didn't want to leave anything to chance for somebody to do something to it. And so you'll see plywood on some of the windows, but the other ones have plexiglass. The one where the hayloft door happens to be a storefront window, because we looked at ways of trying to thermally enhance the rollaway door, and there were just too many large gaps between that and the floor and the walls and the ceiling. The front hayloft door, we managed to actually thermally enhance that, so that was able to be kept intact, just refurbished to allow for the hardware to be used.
Boarded up too.
Yeah. Again, we didn't want to remove anything, to leave it in a chance until it's fully occupied so that nothing can happen.
Okay.
Not that anything will happen, we're to mitigate what can happen.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I've got one more.
Okay.
Was there any consideration of having a complementary brick screening wall so that you wouldn't see it, and any of the noise from the 8 units would be mitigated somewhat?
So for the cages, we needed to have a certain amount of airflow front and back. And so that's why we had to leave it fairly open for that, just to allow for that. And so in front of it, that's why we proposed the planting along the trail, because that was the most visual impact for a public view, unless you're actually on the property.
All right, anyone else with questions? All right, then let's see if the public has some comments. I think Cindy Cromer does. Thank you. Anybody else with any comments, please bring me a card. Otherwise, Cindy, you have the floor.
So, my name is Cindy Cromer, and I sent you some comments, which for me were actually quite early in the day, since they usually arrive shortly before you convene. And I won't repeat those. I want to tell you, as someone who owns property right next to the pump building, that I'm having,
Here?
well, no, the pump building in City Creek Park,
Right.
that this commission spent a lot of time on, like 3 years. I'm having a deja vu experience, because this is the same kind of thing that happened where all of a sudden, different parts of the city were not communicating with each other, and I get to look at 5 ground-mounted utility boxes for the rest of my life, because I don't intend to sell that property. So this is not unique to this particular project. This is a systemic problem affecting city properties, and to the extent that it affects historic properties, I would like for you to address that at some future date, because we have the theft of the fence, which, if you don't know, was just shy of a $500,000 loss
Damn.
to replace.
Well, that.
And the people at the city were so inexperienced that they thought the cost of the appraisal was the value of the fence. Right, that happened. So in addition to the insults to this property, And my own experience at the Pump Building in City Creek Park, there are other buildings, like in Allen Park, where the big house has had raccoons going in and out and water going in and out for the entire year plus that I've been attending meetings. And then there's the Northwest Pipeline, which has had unsheltered folks camping around it. So these are all historic resources for the city, owned by the city, and as I try to stay constructive about things that I really find very troubling, I will tell you that there are people in the city who can address these issues and manage these kinds of construction issues, and they're in housing inspection, because I deal with them in my business licenses. And they're very meticulous. They don't miss a step. They correct me on all sorts of things which are perfectly safe, but maybe not actually perfect. So I think the city has the resources to run herd on these kinds of construction projects. I think they need to deploy them on these important buildings and on all city property, because I think the city should be the good example. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak? Does the applicant want to come back and make any comments? You're good? All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And commissioners, we get to discuss amongst ourselves. Questions? Thoughts? So ugly. Or bugly, as we like to say.
I have a question.
Yes.
You know, when I was reading through this, there was an indication that mechanical permit, the mechanical units didn't receive a permit. Had they applied for a permit?
They did receive a permit.
They
Yeah.
did? Then I misread that.
It was for the 5, yeah, yep. And planning hadn't been updated. Yeah.
Commissioners, just a reminder to please speak directly into your microphones.
But it was technically permitted through building services.
But it was the wrong permit. If they're 5 to 8, is there a difference there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, the wrong number of units
And what's
were
your
permitted.
opinion how the right hand and the left hand communicate better? Is that too long of a story?
Well, like I said, I think staff, and from my experience working on a number of city-owned properties, this does differ from the pump house in City Creek, because the pump house in City Creek was Rocky Mountain Power requirements. That's out of city control. This was unexpected because staff is always available to answer questions to all other divisions and departments. And we work very closely with parks, and so it's quite surprising that this had happened. We've subsequently had a meeting with the engineering division to discuss how to avoid this in the future.
That's good, but what do you suggest we do with this?
Well, staff has made a recommendation in the staff report.
Okay, and you're behind that one?
I did write it. So,
Just trying to get the bottom of that.
yeah. Mhm.
All right.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Is the timetable to occupy this building? Because it seems like I can see that you're accruing enormous costs and losses to the property in security and theft. So it seems like the answer to that would be to use the building. And so when do you guys expect to be moved in?
You got to come up here. I would think you'd want to start
Come
using
on up to the microphone. Thank you.
There is a temporary certificate of occupancy currently on the building right now. So we are waiting on the few items left to install to fully close the project, but it can be occupied right now because the fire alarm system, the safety systems are in place, and it meets all the requirements for occupancy currently. It's just that the boarded up windows and doors, which aren't conducive to life safety issues, aren't required for that.
Okay. Is it my understanding that this is where, like, if I wanted to check out a kayak, I would go to this building?
Yes, there is a dock, and the plan was to have a paddle share program on the adjacent concrete.
And is
slab.
that planned to open this year?
I can't answer that.
I'll speak to that. Yeah, so that was in the initial request, is to have a paddle share program here. That was not funded through City Council and has not yet been. We are exploring that as a possible project as the recently approved general obligation parks bond. So those projects have not been determined yet, but that is one that is on the list.
Okay.
The dock to Portage is in place, though.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Just wondered when I can get myself a kayak and go. All right.
And Chairman, if I could just add one additional comment with regards to occupancy, and Mark Stevens with the city engineer may be able to add some additional to that as well. But currently, we just have the two remaining items left for completion. That is the front storm door and the windows. We have temporary occupancy, and we can begin moving staff into there. The problem will be we do not have network connection to this building yet, and we cannot get that until the snow melts off of Ensign Peak. So we're looking at probably April when IMS can connect network connection here. In the time being, we do have temporary security that is on the site every night. And I guess to the comment of losses to the building right now, to my knowledge, we have not had any losses due to vandalism on the carriage house itself. That is still secured and fenced. The fencing that was removed happened last year outside of that secured construction fencing.
Great. Any other questions?
No question. Was that the wrought iron fence in the front of the building that was stolen?
That's correct.
It was a bronze fence. That's why it was so expensive.
Yeah, and did they ever catch anybody for that?
My understanding is that they were able to locate, I think it was distributed to 5 different recycle centers. They
Oh,
were able
Lord.
to locate about 90% of it,
Oh,
but it was cut up in order to be removed.
sure. But did they arrest anyone?
That I'm unaware.
Okay.
Are there other examples in town of projects that have been well done regarding this type of installation of HVAC that has nice screening, or are there any examples of how it could have been done better?
I can't think of one associated with the sheer volume of units. And I think that is truly the issue from staff. I agree that the site is difficult because you truly do have 3 secondary elevations, 1 primary. None really function as that tertiary elevation like Ken was explaining. The north elevation makes sense for a mechanical equipment installation. However, the volume of units is the issue.
And another question, you mentioned that, I don't know, it was prohibitive to, for the interior, I'm not finding the right words here, but you were forced to go with this particular installation because you didn't want to disrupt the interior further, is that correct? Or was it a cost issue? Because my understanding is that in terms of historic preservation, the exterior trumps the interior.
We were looking for the compromise between the two, just for the fact that when you look on the inside, we were planning on leaving most of the structure exposed, and you can see that, which is, relatively nice to view, and we cleaned it up. The impact for it to do in other systems was that the ductwork system would be extensive, and a good majority of that would be covered up. In order to support that, in lieu of these condensing units, you would have to have air handlers, which would be substantially larger than these. And that was one of the compromises that we did, is that what can we do to minimize the size of the units in order to support the interior and not disrupt the interior, as well as not wholly disrupting the exterior, except for the fact that when things evolved, it's unfortunate that the miscommunication from the design team to HLC occurred, and we're trying to remedy that.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Green.
it seems to me like the biggest problem here is the additional 3 condensing units here. And I guess I'd like to know, so how did this, I mean, it seems like, did the guys who came to sell you these units just decide that you needed more, but you were permitted for 5, so why did that make such an increase?
It was based on the evaluation of the actual use of the different rooms. We're not sure exactly why it wasn't mitigated, because the original design had 8 interior units and 5 exterior units to support those. But in order to, the way the building on the interior is divided, the engineer was convinced that a 1-to-1 ratio was better to support the building in its use, to meet the load capacities. And that's where that evolved. And that's where the
So along that same line, does that mean there are 8 rooms for the?
So there's 8, there's actually 2 in one room. And so it's the way it's configured. So if you go into the loft area, there's actually 2 units in there. There's 1 in each of the rooms in the front, in the upstairs. 1 in the office, because there's a ADA office in the front, workroom, and then in the assembly room.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Has there been any attention to possibly mitigating the appearance of the cages as well, or is that not a possibility?
So when we evaluated, we didn't look at coloring the cages, just that we were trying to Photoshop what we could on there, and that would have been a little bit more difficult to do. Not that you couldn't do it, but in the scheme of things, I'm not so sure it's the cages that's the problem. It's actually the mass of the units that's the problem, and that's kind of hard to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, staff and applicant. Let us, I'm fishing for a motion now. Any motion from any of you?
Can we discuss a little more?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
I guess I'm having a hard time imagining what a rosier solution to this would be, given the conditions that have been described by the applicants. And I'm not a mechanical engineer. So I'm not an HVAC expert. So I would love to hear from other folks if they feel like they have a
Michael,
rosier picture.
I would say that, and first off, I mean, I want this building open as quickly as possible. I think it's great for the neighborhood, it's great for the trail. All of that being said, I think the paint of the vertical conduits is a step in the right direction, but no amount of paint can visually make it go away. I understand what was said, that there's a distance that you have to keep back so that you've got enough air circulation. But quite frankly, even if it was a 30% or 50% open weave brick wall that was set far enough away so that air could go through it, then you wouldn't just have this at the back of this building. That is really unfortunate. I applaud the fact that, and whether it went from 5 to 8, that's, I know and understand that it futzes with the interior as little as possible, and I get that. I just think that I can't help but think that there's got to be additional screening here that would just visually make this go away more than that image right there.
I agree with you, Michael. I think that additional screening, the screening that has been shown along the parkway, I think is nice. But I think that additional screening, so that when you actually look at the building itself, that your eye is not drawn directly to the units, is important as well.
Do we have the staff recommendation on that we can show?
My objection here is that it covers the entire north elevation of the building. And, and 5 ugly condensation units is one thing, but having the whole darn elevation covered in these things is a deal breaker. And I don't agree that it needs that much air conditioning. I'm not a mechanical engineer either, but I do think that if it was permitted for 5, then 8 is more than just a deal breaker.
Generally, they're like slatted fences with some kind of landscaping around that I see. So you could step the fence back and then put some stuff on the north side and some by the fence side. I mean, there's options to do this. Obviously, it was a FUBAR thing, but yeah, there's ways of hiding it, I would agree.
Sorry, a FUBAR thing?
A FUBAR thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I just turned this off.
Did I turn it off?
I
Okay.
thought I did.
Any other thoughts, comments? Still trolling for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Yay.
Based on, this is a motion sheet, a motion for, do I need to, motion for the Fisher Mansion Carriage House major alteration, PLNHLC 2023-00118. I make a motion to deny. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission deny this application based on the staff's recommendation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great, so we have the motion made by Amanda and a second by Emily, and we'll go through here. All right, so Emily, yes or no? Or discussion, any discussion? Sorry, I was moving too fast. Okay, good. Emily?
I vote yay for the staff recommendation.
Okay, Michael Abramson?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Vila, yes, and I would agree, so the motion is unanimous. Thank you. All right, we're going to now close the public hearing, which means basically you can hang out, listen, but you can't talk. We're going to do a work session regarding window requirements for new construction in local historic districts. Thank you all. You don't have to hang out for this. And Cindy, you can hang out if you want. Oh, right. And I want to welcome back Carlton and John, who had to recuse themselves from that vote. Thank you. Did you have a nice vacation? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so Amy is going to be replacing Lex. What's wrong with Lex?
Oh, nothing. He flew out somewhere tonight. I don't
Okay,
remember
fun
where.
for him. All right.
But he's not ill or anything.
So planning staff requests that the Historic Landmark Commission consider window replacements for new construction projects in the city's local historic districts. Planning staff is seeking direction regarding appropriate types of windows, particularly in terms of materials and installation, and how we can better clarify requirements in the various documents, including the zoning ordinance standards and design guidelines that are used to evaluate new construction project requests. All right, staff. Ba-da-da.
Oh, no. Not this again. Let's see. Okay, sorry.
The bane of our existence, windows.
Okay, so this is a work session. Again, planning staff is just seeking input from the Historic Landmark Commission regarding window requirements specifically for new construction in the city's local historic districts. Planning is seeking direction regarding appropriate types of windows in terms of material and window installation, and how we can better clarify requirements in the various documents of the zoning ordinance and design standards used to evaluate new construction projects. The purpose for requesting feedback is so that we can ensure that the ordinance standards and guidelines are clear in regards to new construction projects. This helps ensure clarity with staff as we're analyzing projects, as well as for applicants as they're designing their projects.
Where is it not clear?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
These are the questions that I'm going to pose at the end, but I want you to be thinking about these as I go through the project. Should we allow the use of vinyl windows in new construction? Should we prohibit the use of vinyl windows in new construction? Or should we allow for a hybrid use of vinyl windows in new construction, essentially based on location, installation, and siding materials? So the moment you've been waiting for, Babs, the issues with our current standards and design guidelines. I wanted to just give a brief overview of those. First, the current design standards and guidelines somewhat skirt around the use of vinyl as an appropriate window material. The design guidelines discourage their use, but they don't outright prohibit it. This is essentially because vinyl is not considered a durable material, nor appropriate in terms of the historic district and compatibility. The guidelines do encourage the use of durable materials, presumably wood, metal clad wood, and composite. As a result, the HLC has required wood or metal clad wood windows on some projects or other types of composite like fiberglass, and has approved vinyl in some instances. Second, the design standards don't specifically identify the amount that the window should be recessed into the building. So they talk about that windows should be recessed to be compatible with the district, but it doesn't give like a specific dimension for that. Staff typically requires a 2 to 3 inch recession on new construction projects, but again, it's not clear in the guidelines or the standards. And finally, window materials and installation in new construction projects is not consistent between the various design guidelines we have, specifically the residential design guidelines versus the historic apartment and multifamily guidelines. The multifamily guidelines are much more extensive and descriptive than the residential design guidelines in terms of windows and new construction. However, staff thinks that both of those guidelines could be improved for clarity. As part of our analysis, staff looked into several cities and whether or not they allow vinyl for use in their new construction projects. Wow. Specifically, we looked at Charleston, Savannah, Boise, Boston, Los Angeles, Denver, New Orleans, Portland, South Bend, Indiana, Nashville, and Ogden, Utah. The vast majority of these cities do not allow vinyl windows in new construction in their historic districts. Some, however, do allow them. Surprisingly, Charleston and New Orleans both allow vinyl windows in new construction.
Why? Due
You
to
want to
mold?
speak up?
Yeah,
They're disposable.
we asked Lex about that because Lex and, sorry.
We have a,
Oh, I thought you
So I would believe that the situation there is because they're disposable. And that's, I mean, because they have such extreme weather situations that they are going to just pop out. They're just going to need something cheap to put back in there. From my experience, when I look at aluminum clad and hybrid, I mean, and I don't have as much experience looking at composite and, you know, the FiberX sort of materials, and I'd be happy to look at that a little closer. But when I look at an aluminum clad wood product, I do not see any more built-in durability than when I examine a vinyl window. I think that there's so many tiny parts that are just sort of, they're still basically Wonder Bread Kraft single sandwiches just melted together. And there's a lot of little pieces that just, I don't think, are going to stay in that goo.
The aluminum clad and
The
wood.
aluminum clad.
I think I've seen reports that molding can occur.
Yeah, there's a
quite-
lot of opportunities
pockets.
for moisture to get in there, and then mold, and then there is also they're basically glued together with, and that glue I've seen fail, and there's just so many parts that could go awry that I think they're both, you know, a dubious long-term solution. But that's all I've got on that.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, Chair DeLay, did you ask why some of these districts that we hold up in the nation as being like whatever our first historic districts. Lex did ask that question, and it's because some of their it's purely economic, that a lot of their historic districts are in
Poor neighborhoods.
poor neighborhoods, quite frankly.
Yep.
Yeah, that was specific to New Orleans. This chart actually has another bar to it, or another, I guess,
Column?
column to it, yes, that gives a little bit more detail on like what they allowed or why. And I think the New Orleans column talks about the, I guess they call it an economic hardship essentially. But Charleston was a little surprising to me. They also have kind of like a list of windows that they just approve, like that are just something that they've approved on other projects. And so if somebody goes in with an application for like a, you know, a whatever brand window that we have approved in the past, it's just kind of an automatic approval if it meets X, Y, and Z. Many of the cities had kind of a hybrid option. Essentially, they look at things like visibility from the street, the type of material that the window is, the wall plane associated with the window next to it, and again, getting to that recession. So the following are just some slides. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, so these just get into the photos of some examples of projects, and these are all in Salt Lake City within our local historic districts. Some of the projects you may have been on the commission when these have come through. So this is an example of a recently approved multifamily development in one of the city's local historic districts. You can notice the difference in the installation material of the wall plane. So on the stucco, you can see it's very flat because of the stucco material. And then again, when it's in the brick facade material, there is a slight recession.
Is that acceptable?
Can I just make a note?
Yeah.
When this particular application came to the Landmark Commission, they brought in an actual example of the window and the brick. However, we missed the stucco part of it, so it's
Like, oops, half the building was
Flush.
stucco. We forgot to tell you.
right. So there isn't, yeah.
Okay, well, I know nothing about windows, so
We've got more photos.
We have more photos. We're just trying to highlight. We're just trying to highlight.
Yeah, just so some of the differences between some of these.
So the reason you want your window to be set back is every time you bend or fold or cover or whatever, you're karate chopping the opportunity for air and wind to get in there. And so when you see this flat part next to the stucco, when water runs down that, it's going to catch on that lip and go right in. All right, and there's nothing to stop that water from coming from the top, from the sides. And they've just basically made cheap stripes of this building. And those are, you know,
that's
10
really
years.
bad, it was what you're saying.
So, I mean, parts of this building are well constructed, and then they've had to make some cost-cutting measures. And so one person living in this apartment is going to be okay, and these guys are going to have
Interesting.
drafty,
Yeah.
wet, mold sorts of situations. And so it's not just for good looks that you want that setback. It's because, I mean, and it is better looking, but it's because you stop air and water from just draining into the house.
So we
Right.
these windows are okay if they're set back as far as we're concerned?
We encourage that, yes.
Yeah, we
But
encourage a
windows
window
are- But
inset.
these windows are vinyl, and we don't like that.
This was before that, this was approved right before a current rewrite of all of our new construction code.
Oh, okay.
And when this project was approved, we did not have anything on the books legally to say we can use our design guidelines for new construction. Now on the books, we have a lot of standards for new construction, and there's a statement in there that says, for new construction, look at XYZ standards, but we can use the design guidelines as a key element for decision-making. You can use them. But we want to be like as transparent and predictable with the development community as well.
Sure.
Making sure that we're as clear as possible in the code and in our design guidelines, and to accomplish our goals. So if that helps. with
So
kind of how we got here.
It's a little hard to tell from this photo, but even on the brick, it doesn't look like there's a 2 or 3 inch regress on
No,
this.
this is a very minimal recession. We have other examples
Recession, yeah.
further along that have more of a recession, and I think that's part of the discussion. Like, do we want to actually have a prescriptive amount or like a minimum that the window needs to be recessed?
Do we? Do we have an idea?
I think we might want to.
Yeah, I think we might want to.
I think we might. I think it would be easier for us, easier for you, easier. Right.
Yeah.
I think it.
Well, who decides that, Mike?
What's that?
Who decides that? How many inches?
Right now, we've been at a staff level kind of just saying, typically 2 to 3 inches, and that kind of gets at some of our design guidelines and standards that relate to design and having shadow lines on the building and, not flat facades and articulation, but it is challenging when applicants challenge us on, they think it's recessed enough and we don't think it's recessed enough. So that's part of the reason why we're here tonight.
Right. And,
Yeah.
there's certainly a give and take too, right? If you want it recessed less because if you were to allow vinyl and you wanted it to be, there are warranties involved, right? Because these fail, right? And probably 4 years, maybe if you're lucky.
Well, it's not the windows so much as that your walls are going to get moist.
Well, that's what I mean. If you
Yeah.
recess them, what happens
windows
to the
go-
warranty and
Yeah.
all of that stuff? Because they are going to fail. There are studies that they fail in this climate.
It's an easier detail in masonry, either
It's an
stone
easier
or
detail
brick. It's easy
with
to do it
masonry.
because the brick itself has got dimension.
Correct, right.
Stucco EFS, in any one of these are, basically about an inch and a half, 2 inches at most.
So would it be different from stucco to brick, or would you have a universal 2 inches?
We have some examples of some stucco ones later in this presentation. I just have a few more pictures if you want me to
Take a
go
look.
through
Let's
them.
take a look. Carlton, did you have one last comment, though?
Well, I was just going to say, I actually agree with Mike that I think that there should be a standard, a minimum standard that we would set for historic districts. And I'll be interested in seeing the ones that have stucco, because we have stucco and we have windows and we have a recession in our windows in the stucco.
Yeah.
So it's not something that can't be done.
It's not insurmountable.
Yeah, there are 2 good examples. Unfortunately, both the good examples that we found are not straight up vinyl, they're Fibrex, but you'll see. Again, this is a vinyl window installed on a primary facade that's brick cladding. It has a minimum reveal. I think this one was approximately 1 inches is what the plan said. This one has some recession on the lower level of the brick facade, but as you can see, the ones on the upper story, there's not a recession at all in those other stucco wall planes.
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about the brick issue they got. there.
Yeah. It looks like they have a little bit of
going on there.
moisture
and
issue there.
Is that snow on that side of the building, or is that EFS already? Is it already?
Oh, that's,
I mean, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
5 stories. There's
Mhm.
a visual difference.
Right.
40 miles an hour.
Yeah. This is, these are some good examples of windows. This is on the new Masonic apartments. And it's a good example of a recessed window in both a brick facade as well as a stucco facade. These have been installed with a 2 to 3 inch reveal. And again, also the window type, I think, helps in terms of the design, but these are a Fibrex window. This is not a vinyl window. Here's a side view as well.
Since we have an expert here on windows, what is the trend now? Is it the Fibrex windows or the vinyl? Pretty equal?
Yeah, the window industry is actively moving away from vinyl because of its horrible reputation. Because, I mean, even Anderson's advertising suggests that it's not going to hold up better than your vinyl fence, which we've all seen, be a comedy. And what they're moving to instead, I'm not convinced that it's any big improvement. It's basically they took sawdust and added it to vinyl or fiberglass or whatever their chemical composition is, but they've added some, I guess, organic materials to their inorganic materials, but it's basically an extruded product. So, and time will tell. I'm a wood person, so, 100% wood is where I go. But, I'm not familiar exactly with how well this will endure through the future, but I am as suspicious as I am optimistic.
I believe they're more expensive, a little bit more expensive than vinyl, right? The composites, they're thicker. It's a less toxic manufacturing process. They do not much beefier window, right? So it's not expanding and you're contracting and failing like the standard vinyl window is. So we're seeing a lot of applications with composite windows where people are paying a little bit more but getting a more robust window. That's what we're seeing. We've been seeing at the city as more of a trend.
We have some composite windows. They're manufactured by EMSCO. And our experience so far has been quite positive with them, actually. And SHPO's experience with them has been quite positive, actually, so far. So, as a data point.
Yeah. And we're positive put towards them, too, in our program. Go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of most of the new construction projects that were sent to LEX in regards to what the Landmark Commission, this commission has approved in the past, many of them were a similar model. I think it was the Anderson 100 series for the Fibrex composite. And most of them were also inset, this like 2 to 3 inches. And then I think this one is the last example. This is another multifamily project, the Haxton, and again, showing the 2 different recessions in the stone material as well as the stucco facade. And these are also recessed 3 inches.
I think it looks more historical when it's recessed like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
And these are
to me,
also
it reminds me
Fibrex.
as a kid, you had a ledge.
Yeah.
I could sit on the ledge and count the cabs in New York. 1 million, 1,000,002. Yeah. It's a totally different feeling. I never noticed this before.
That's the reveal.
Yeah, I think that's probably mostly because these are all like veneer, whether it's stucco or masonry. It's installed on top of like a plywood, and most of the windows come with flanges that you basically just nail into the plywood. So that's kind of with a typical dimension, that's like your limiting factor right there, is just how deep the flanges are within the window.
Sure. So
With the
what?
wall, really. I mean, so my impression of our first set of pictures was that the brick is going over that is adding dimension to the wall, and the stucco does not have that dimension. And so it's a thinner wall, and that is where the absence of that ledge is coming from, because it's less wall and not just less window.
Yeah, it's like the brick wall will have, your 3 5/8 brick with like a couple inches of an air gap behind it, and then you get to the actual wood structural part of the wall. So it creates kind of depth automatically.
Stucco or plaster or that kind of material,
right?
You have to have it thicker so that you can, inset more.
Yeah, so it'd be hard to inset super far into stucco. You'd have to actually build like a return on the wall.
Oh.
At least I think that's how you do it.
You know this?
On the outside of just the
Yeah.
build it out so you can recess again.
The trick.
Yeah.
I think when I look at this window example here, there's just a quality level that is evident here. Not evident in 2 slides before, where everything is just flush wall-like plan.
I think Babs, I agree with you. You said what I was thinking on my way here tonight. I wasn't realizing what I was seeing in terms of, oh, I like that. Oh, why don't I like that? And so it's helped me to put some words to it. And it also, some of these examples of the straight walls, they remind me of East Germany. And I think what that reminds me of, what comes to my mind is a lack of quality, a lack of forethought, a lack of intention in the construction. So
It's interesting, I've been called in to be an expert witness in a mold issue, and one of the things was a picture of the stucco, and the windows were flush to the edge where all the water comes in, and they've had to rip out basically all the walls because it's so mold infested. Really interesting, but this picture is perfect. Now I'm just going to look at every building so much differently that's new construction.
There's a head gutter detail, but it basically kind of just takes it off to the side.
Uh-huh.
And then it
Yeah.
start here,
Uh-huh.
start here. But
That's bad.
it's all flush.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right. Any other pictures?
Not in this presentation. There are a few more in the actual packet, the work session packet in the Dropbox, but these basically convey the same thing that those do.
So what would you like from us?
Wow. Getting back to these questions, again, should we allow the use of vinyl? We want to note that staff thinks that just the use of vinyl across the board without any type of, regulations or on all facades may not be in line with the preservation program or just best practices in terms of preservation. Should we prohibit the use of vinyl? Again, a total ban on vinyl windows is probably not reasonable, particularly in instances where facades aren't readily visible from the right-of-way. And should we allow for a hybrid use of vinyl windows based on location, installation, and siding materials? And I think perhaps the hybrid use might be the best option for us, but that's what we're hoping to get your feedback on tonight.
Well, let's do them one by one. Should we allow the use of vinyl windows in new construction? Commissioners? Thoughts?
I'll step in. My gut reaction is to say no.
Okay. Let's see, historic districts, if we had a 100-year-old home and we had a hearing with their windows, we would want the windows facing the street to be wood and the sides to be vinyl would be acceptable? I'm just talking off my top of my
We
head.
would want to retain all original historic windows. If they were deteriorated beyond repair, street-facing windows on the front, we would hold the line on.
Yep.
And readily visible windows.
Oh, okay.
We
Readily
would be
visible.
incredibly
Even if
strict.
it's on the sides.
Even if it's on the sides, like a bay window,
Yeah.
we
but
would,
new
we would, and you've seen us come with
Sure,
recommendations.
but
Like,
new constructions, that's not going to work for new construction, is it? I'm thinking, okay, I need to take that back. I'm thinking of a 6-story apartment building. Would we want that to be all wood windows? No, that's not going to happen.
I don't think that we
But
would
not vinyl.
require wood windows on new construction
Okay.
necessarily.
So do we need to, it says new construction.
Yeah, so right now our standards require 80% durable material on all facades for new construction, but it exempts windows and doors from that requirement, which is sort of confusing because then it talks about durable materials in terms of the siding not being appropriate as vinyl. And so there's just some confusion in the standards on whether or not vinyl is appropriate as a durable material. And again, the guidelines and standards don't specifically prohibit it, but it's discouraged.
Let's do a straw poll. John, yes or no?
I don't think it should be an absolute ban.
Okay.
I think some hybrid, but yeah.
Hybrid? Okay, I'm going to put a hybrid on here. Hybrid. Mike?
I'm the same way, and I also think, no
Hybrid,
pun intended, once you open the window on vinyl, then I think on the historic side, we're going to have people over and over. Well, you let them do it on new
Yep,
construction.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
I want it to be as good as possible. So I'm with you, John, that hybrid is the way to go.
Okay, Carlton?
Like I said before, I'm probably more to the side of not allowing vinyl on new construction regardless. I would go back to the conversations that we've had on some of the projects we've looked at on 700 East, for example, on that corner where, if we're trying to maintain new construction to reflect the historical context of an area, assuming that there is historical context in that area, vinyl is inconsistent with that regardless, and historical context for the related buildings around that. At least certainly on the most visible sides. You know, if you've got a backside, then maybe there's an argument to be had there, but I do think that there's some level of consistency that would be warranted. I'd also say, and this is from my perspective, we did not, when we've replaced several of our windows, even on non-public facing facades, even on areas where the only people that can see them is the neighbor that's 3 feet away from us, we did not go with vinyl. One, because we wanted to keep the historical consistency of the entire building there and not have the inconsistency of using vinyl versus the very detailed regress that we have on the other windows on our building. But the other aspect is that from a quality and standpoint, if we are truly invested in preserving the building and protecting the building, vinyl is not going to achieve that no matter where it's installed.
Thank you. Amanda, hybrid, yes or no? Vinyl, yes or no?
I was all set to be a strong proponent for hybrid. However, after your eloquent statement there, I lean towards no vinyl at all because there seem to be better products out there. They may not be road tested, but it sounds like some of the composites have more durability, so why wouldn't you?
Great. Michael
In that
2.0,
direction.
yes, no, hybrid?
I'm leaning towards hybrid.
Okay.
Partly because I feel like it might be in line with historic construction methods where you would have common brick, for example, on non-street facing facades and more of a face brick facing towards the streets. And I think that in comparison, you know, maybe you could make an argument that wood windows facing the street, less expensive window solution facing away from the street, facing courtyards, facing what have you. So I'm starting to think about that. Like, that a hybrid solution seems. I guess I wanted to ask the two of you about the word reasonable. I hate to pull on a word, but like that a total ban on vinyl windows is probably not reasonable because of the amount of work time from staff it would require to say no. I guess I was wondering about that. What does that mean?
Slide together.
Yeah. We'll have to contact Lex.
Hold on, let me call him. Just kidding.
I think maybe what he was getting at in terms of reasonable is just typically when we are reviewing projects, we do focus on those visible facades. I mean, with new construction projects, like I said, some of our standards do discuss durable materials on all facades. And so we are looking at the design of all of them, but in terms of ones that we can't see, even with our historic buildings that are contributing, we are more flexible on non-visible facades. So I think that was the idea behind the reasonable language.
So one more, Commissioner Emily, hybrid or no?
I don't think the term hybrid is clear enough, and in fact, I don't like it at all. I'd like to tell a story about my personal experience using windows in a multifamily historic context. Before I bought a house, I lived in the Lincoln Arms building, which is right across from the Episcopalian on First South, 242 East. Before I moved in, they'd put vinyl windows in the building, and I was incensed. Since this is a lifelong pursuit of mine. But having used those windows for 8 years, they didn't give me any trouble. It's a well-constructed building, it's well-loved, and the windows they put in, were vinyl, but not every vinyl window is the same. And I mean, you get what you pay for with a window, and there is no such thing as a cheap window. You can put something that's, an inch, 3/4 of an inch into your building, and you're gonna get 3/4 of an inch worth of window. And that's not going to do the job. So I don't think that we've done enough here to address the quality of the window. We've only addressed the material it's made of, and I don't think that it's clear for anyone. And and I know a lot about windows, and this just doesn't tell me enough about windows to give me any way to vote on this.
Although more commissioners are leaning towards hybrid.
And I think when we mean hybrid, probably like readily visible from the streets,
Well,
prohibiting them and.
let's define that, maybe. That's what she's saying.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
should be hybrid use of vinyl. I mean, even though I am a purist, I don't hate a vinyl window, and I was actually leaning towards you can use a vinyl window when it's appropriate, but I don't think you should use a cheap vinyl window. And I don't think that the word hybrid suggests that it's a wood. I mean, are they going to make a vinyl-clad wood window? And how is that going to hold up compared to an aluminum-clad wood window? And I just think that that's wildly unclear. So I would say.
Emily, in terms of quality, so this is meant to be like a discussion. By no means are we going to put the hybrid word in our zoning ordinance or our design guidelines. But in terms of quality, is there anything that like we could look to require that would get us the quality of a window?
Absolutely. I'd want to talk about the dimensions that includes the setback from the edge of the building. I'd like to talk about the dimensions of the rails and stiles.
You can research that.
And that's a big deal. And the bigger the setback, the better the window is going to resist the weather.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the material it's made of is only a very small factor in how the window performs. If it's made with a bunch of tiny straws, then it's not going to hold up. If it's made out of a nice beefy piece of vinyl, that's a different situation. So,
Straws like the three little pigs? What
like
are you talking about?
like the three little pigs, like
Okay, all
like
right.
drinking straws, like.
Okay.
So can I try to recap what I think you've asked
Please.
us to do is research different types of vinyl windows and their quality and perhaps like durability or fail rates.
I'd like to. The important
open it-
components of any piece of construction is dimensions.
And the
How
dimensions.
much material is there? And I guess the term hybrid is just too big for me.
So you think that we're maybe like jumping the gun, going to the prohibit hybrid?
Absolutely.
Open it up, rather we can come back with more research to say we think this is, give you information on the quality, the dimension, the setbacks, and like possibly veneer thickness that would add to
Is there, I mean.
an ideal situation?
With woodworking, you got AWS or, any one of standards. Is there a comparable on the window side for these fixed or operable windows that you can say I'm making this a National Window Association or something that, this is a.
Standard?
A standard that is, to get to the quality level, because everybody's going to say, this is my product is the best quality ever. Is there something that is a industry standard that you could point to that says,
Oh, as far as industries go, you won't find a more contentious group of people than fenestration regulators.
I think you're definitely right there. And class action lawsuits and all
I
that.
was a member of the NFRC, the National Fenestration Rating Council, and there are a lot of opinions, and it's a fire-breathing room of people, and
So the answer is no.
The answer is no. The answer is no.
I don't even want to go there. Stop.
It's horrible. It's really. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it.
But the other cities have done research. Like I know Savannah, Georgia, they actually provide high quality composite and vinyl.
Even if they have a list of.
They have lists.
15 manufacturers or equal. So then it's up to the company to say, this is equal to this because of all of these dimensions, the thickness, the weight, all of those kinds of things.
You want to
I think
subcommittee
that's
this?
another way of getting around that.
We could subcommittee it.
Well, it sounds like
But-
maybe get a couple of experts in here, even though they might be contentious, and Emily might be on the subcommittee to help you all, but
I'd be happy to
I
help
don't
with
think
that.
I know enough, and I learned so much tonight just about the setback of windows. That's totally visual now. I'm going to look at every window that way now. Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the notes in the chart that was shown earlier of the different cities, and it's really helpful in terms of the language they're using. Like Boston, no vinyl in general, but can use on exempt, unseen facades.
Perfect. Love that.
Charleston, see written policy statement, which I'd like to see. Actually, that would be helpful. Unless an economic burden, wood-framed windows are required on all facades. For Los Angeles, yeah, I think this is really helpful, just to give us a sense of what the language might look like. I don't know if folks have read that yet. It's in the memo.
Yeah, and if you wanted us all to like do the some of this research and then come back, we certainly
Yes,
could. And
please.
we could even include like some of the flyers that we found, like the one for Charleston where it talks about like, we can approve X, Y, and Z window in whatever circumstance. We could pull some of those as examples just for you all to see if that would help.
Yeah, it would, and to make some recommendations based on that. Would you all agree? Yeah, give us more information.
I would agree.
Excellent.
Just one other thing I wanted to ask is that, was there any consideration, it's kind of ancillary to this, but fixed versus operable, just in terms of, when everybody was looking at the images, seeing just one sheet of glass in an opening as opposed to a double hung window, there's a quality level there as well, in addition to the reveal. Is that a part of the research that you were doing?
Certainly, like some of the window examples, particularly these ones, it's more of a typical historic traditional style of a window, whereas these others, not so much. I think our guidelines and standards are pretty clear in terms of like design of window. We haven't really had a lot of challenges in terms of like fenestration and style.
Just saying operable, not double hung or jalousie or
Yeah.
sliding like these, but just the notion that operable windows in themselves have a quality look that a single sheet, if all of those were just a single sheets, they would obviously look and feel different. More to your point, more like East Germany maybe.
It looked
Yeah.
like these. Right?
Yeah, I don't know if we looked into operability, but that's definitely something that we can pay closer attention to for when we come back.
Question, yeah.
Yeah.
Groovy. Any other thoughts? All right, I'm going to...
Well, I feel like I need to come to the defense of the East German construction industry here, but maybe we'll leave that for another day.
All right, I'm going to close the work session. Do we have any other business? All right, then, I close this meeting.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Thank you.